Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Hope that your day has been splendiferous. And today we are continuing with our module, which is the third module of our, yes, it is. It is the third module of our course, known particularly as stakeholders, right? So this module is one of the easiest to take in. It's very relatable in that, we have stakeholders, we deal with stakeholders on a daily basis. After having known what a stakeholder is, it's quite easy to relate to a lot of what is being discussed within the module. So today, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to deal with learning outcome 2.2 instead of 2.1. This is why, right? The main reason is this. I have already communicated to you guys that with the way that things are being done is that SIPs repeat certain chapters or certain learning outcome sections in other modules. So what you're finding here is what we were dealing with in the last lesson, Yarona, M1 and M2. Right. So basically it referencing 2.1. Right, it says identifying the key economic sectors that impact on a procurement and supply function. And we go on to talk about public, private, and not-for-profit or third sector. So I'm just saying, giving you a heads up, Yahor, if I were to go on into this, it would just be a repetition that to some degree would be senseless. Right, guys? So we are going to go on and deal with chapter 2.2. But perhaps before I go there, I think let me just give all fairness to chapter 2.1, and give a bit of explanation as to what exactly it entails. Okay. Yebo. So it deals with the sectors of economy. As we had discussed already, right? There are two ways to classify the economic sectors of the economy, right? The first is categorized according to production, right? Which details whether it's in primary, secondary, or tertiary. And then the other one deals with whether or not this is in the production sector or service sector, right? It's as simple as that. So yeah, we dealt with these. We dealt with private sectors. We talked about what sole traders are. And then I think we never went too much, right, into the actual different types of companies, right? So I think without going too much into it, I'll just detail to you, right, what exactly is being referenced when we talk about advantages of a sole proprietorship. So first of all, what are sole traders, right? Sole traders are some of the are one but of many of the examples dying to the private sector businesses. So the private sector businesses gain. The private sector businesses are those that are owned who? Privately, by private individuals, right? So these are the examples, guys. You remember there was a time I showed you a hierarchy, right? Of okay, different sectors of the economy. Private, public, third sector. I get. And then arrows. I believe those arrows were showing okay, Hana, go private sector, renale the incorporated, non-incorporated, if you guys recall well enough. If not, it's okay. You guys can still question me and I'll give you a brief explanation about it, right? But it's in these notes. But yeah, we have partnerships, private limited companies, and public limited companies. And then we have cooperators, we have franchises, we have parastatals. If you guys are aware of these terminologies, they are found in the private sector, right? So yeah, sole traders is just one of them. Sole traders, basically the word soul refers to oneness, right? A trader who pushes the demeanor of oneness, of a oneness culture, right? It is owned and controlled by one person. The owner is liable for the business debts and the advantages to it, It's cheap to start, you are your own boss, you keep all the profits, there's maximum privacy, and there's unlimited liability. I think for all of these, I'll just touch on liability, the liability factor. So what liability is that, guys? So should you have you take care of all the liabilities of the business. That's why Ibuaka, all the debts are handled by you. So liability is basically what you owe, right? So if the organization owes something to somebody, you owe it to somebody because you are a sole trader, right? Yeah, so I just mentioned about the advantages, but the disadvantages is that you become fully liable for things like donate debts and what have you, right? So your savings, your home can be in danger if ukolotabat when you can't pay it up, right? So yeah, so continuity of business is highly affected if you're a sole trader. How CEO, there's no one who's gonna do it. That's why I formalized the organization, procurement mastery because I saw her, okay, Juana, there's a need for people to budge in and come and help me out because alone, I can see what happens to my students. I can see maybe there was a possibility that I might not attend, be able to record class, and that was gonna be greatly affect you guys who are able to listen to these things. Abonakana kwa yalo. So continuity is subsided, Hagisi, or how a business person or operating as a sole trader as you, right? Hey. And then yeah, partnership is a way of organizing a company. It's owned by two or more people, right? Or entities, because a partnership can be between companies as well. So companies can come together and form a company. That's a partnership as well, because it's formed from two entities, right? So yeah, then we talked about limited companies, right? So these are owned by shareholders. Now, that doesn't explain the limitedness of it, right? Where it explains the limitedness of limited companies. Get how thing the owners have limited liability, right? Now, what does that mean? It means that, okay, you are only liable for debts of a business to a limited response, right? You're only liable to go and explain, but your assets, your whatever, are not in danger because you are operating as what? As a limited partner. You are limit. Go to your responsibilities to paying off debts. How numbers you are limited to that. You understand it? So a lot of people like to establish these ones. That's why you'll see a lot of LTDs and what have you, business names, right? So yeah, there are two types of private limited companies, right? Um, and public limited companies. That's how they exist on any limited companies. There are two types. One are the private limited and one are the public limited, right? So private limited, the shares something they are privately owned. Like I said, guys, I had touched on these already, I'm just, giving a little bit of brief synopsis, just so we don't go into today's lesson dry. So yeah, shares are sold privately instead of the posted on the stock exchange and what have you, right? So shares are shared privately. And then the owners, they have limited liability. So the owners exist separately from the business, and that's only what they have invested in business. And they only lose that, only what you've invested. You're not gonna lose any more, you're not gonna lose any less. It's what you've lost in the business. So yeah, public wants to it's just that in that I think the greatest, guys, the greatest thing you can observe is to realize that okay, for Hana, the biggest difference is given to the difference between the sharing capacity. Yes, sharing capacity. I think that's very interesting. Yeah. So unlike private limited companies, Tone, they have more potential for takeover because it's being run and shares that thing are owned by private individuals, but shares are owned by a lot of the general public, right? So they publicize the sale of shares. And then you have cooperatives. There's actually one, I think we should visit these guys and actually find out, get more intel, get more information about how they operate. So cooperatives exist on it to do what? First of all, they operate through the running by members. So members rabahin, that's the people that have contributed for the cooperative to be formed. Not so much like a partnership, right? It's a business run by its members for the benefit of all other members. So it's like you put up a business, but you're saying only like we're only doing it for so that people who own the business can buy from this business. So they're taking, why would they do that? Is because they want to take advantage of things like volume discounts, right? You want to purchase things at a cheaper price. So you go ahead and do that. You buy them for cheaper. You buy them in bulk with other people so that you can buy them at retail for cheaper, right? So members have one share and one vote over the running of the business. It's as simple as that. Your oneness or your member certificatism will dictate how much you are worth. And there are two types of cooperatives, the worker cooperative and the retailer cooperative. So the worker cooperative is basically one that is formed by who? By workers who work in the cooperative. And then retailer cooperative is a lot of retailers meet together and they form a cooperative. It's as simple as that. Not for profit or third sector, we mentioned this one. It's only these charitable organizations, social enterprises. Parastatals is one thing that I actually want to refer to. So parastatals or parastatal is a fully or partially state-owned corporation or government agency, right? Having some political authority and serving the state indirectly. So the example gets on University of Botswana. We all know they have private chancellors. They have people that it operates as a private entity. At the same time, it serves the Botswana, education system. So Air Botswana as well. It's privately owned, partially, and government owned. Now Debsana as well. Cesar is that tall building you guys always see if you've ever come by Finance Park, go fairgrounds. A. So BAC as well. We are the school is operating as since the conception by a foreign buyer, or sorry, not foreign per se, a private buyer. It has been known that it exists now as a parastatal. So this is what we're going to be dealing with today, guys. The impact of demand on supply markets. So demand, right? Demand is a word that I'm most certain that we are all familiar with. So before we even get into it, demand basically, when it comes to your head, you think about foreign. Okay, something is in demand. That thing is in demand. It means that thing is wanted, right? So now we're going to talk about demand and supply. But first, we'll start with demand. Demand and supply now is at the core of market, right? So why is it at the core, right? So when people want to buy a product, it's because of demand, So if more people want to buy a product or service than sell it, then the price moves up. This means this, guys. So if supply is low and the demand is high on something, prices that in the and then conversely, right? It's like an inverse thing. It's an inverse law. It will talk about the law of demand and the law of supply. So conversely, when people want to sell a product, price at the you ever seen the most beautiful of things, but you find them still so cheap? This is because people don't really want that thing, but you can still afford it, right? A. This is because demand that thing in good class, but the supply thing in, you see? And then I want us to give a little bit of interesting information on economics. Now, economics, guys, what I want us to do is talk about the father of economics. His name was Adam Smith. He was popularly referred to as the father of economics. So in 16 June 1723, he gave a very interesting dialogue and memogram, regarding the economic standing of Scotland. So he was born in Scotland, was Scottish moral philosopher, and
he was considered to be the father of economics. Not to bore you with the gory details of economics, guys, because this is not economics, this is SIPS. But just to understand a couple of things, because the book doesn't give so much emphasis on what economics is, right? So yeah, he began public lectures in 1748 in the University of Edinburgh. Edinburgh. Yeah, Edinburgh. So in 1762, the University of Glasgow conferred on Smith the title of Doctor of Laws, LLD. So he basically was a doctor of the law of finances. Now, economics, right, is this. Is a study of how people allocate scarce resources for production, distribution, and consumption, both individually and collectively. This is the definition, guys, that I want you to take to head, that I want you to take to heart, because this is the one that is going to be asked in the exam. I kid you not. You better beware of it. I'm not saying that it is going to come out. It always is. I'm not one to suggest what comes out and what doesn't. But yeah, so we have two types of economics or economical studies, right? Which is microeconomics, right? This one focuses on the behavior of individuals and producers and consumers and what have you, right? But macroeconomics, it examines overall economies on a regional, national, and international scale. So did you see what just happened there? We talked about economics at what? At a smaller scale and at a larger scale. So in a smaller scale, at organizational level, or yeah, that's microeconomics, right? It studies individuals, business decisions, while macroeconomics deals with the outside of the business. I hope you guys are following, right? So micro will deal with both supply and demand and other forces that determine price levels, making it a bottom-up approach. So you're looking from the bottom going up. But macro looks at the top things that are above your business going down to your business. That's why I hold a top-down approach when referring to macro, right? So you guys, please don't get these ones confused, all right? Just be aware of what you're reading and what the question is saying. I get it. So yeah, now we are getting into actually what chapter 2.2 wants. Demand and supply, for us to understand it and understand what affects demand and supply. Why do we need to even understand demand and supply? One might ask themselves as a SIP student. It's because it concerns you. You're procuring things and you have to know whether they are demand allows the price for the tlase kana price for the godimo, because if not, you will be overcharged for certain commodities that you have to procure. But understanding factors that affect it means you are aware of, is this supplier overcharging me unreasonably or not, right? So one of the factors is income of consumers. You have to be aware for, okay, first of all, when I say I want to sell a so-and-so a thing, or when I say we want to procure a certain thing so that we sell it, we resell it, organization in Yaron. What is the income of the consumer, Razaro? What is the income bracket, right? A, are they getting minimum wage or are they giving a fair wage, right, that they can live with? So price of substitutes. What is a substitute? A substitute is a product that is brought in replace of another product. So say for instance, right, instead of cornflakes, somebody will take all bread, right? They're all cereal. Or a more definitive example, instead of cornflakes, somebody would take another breakfast meal, right? Hey, it's substitute. What is the price of a substitute? You'll find what the prices range around the same. That's because demand yone high level okay. And demand we're referring to us who buy, right? Okay, like it's a right? And the price of complements. Complements for the safe, I'll give the same example about cornflakes. The complement you think mash, right? People eat it with milk, right? So mash ya think bukahe. I get. Ha ele gore mashi a tura. Di-cornflakes di a go determine price a teng ka go lebelela price a mashi. Right? Or ha ele gore go reka corn e dirang di-cornflakes mo bathong go a tura. Then price of di-cornflakes goes up. And then demand e be go iragalang? Demand e be ya ko tlase. Kana, because we're referring to the demand of the product, now we're going to look at it like this. Okay, ka price how much ya tura, a ne ra go demand the cornflakes. You get me? A, and then we deal with changes in taste and fashion. Gona na motho o ka tsena ba o reka E250. No, you know, times have passed, fashion and trends have evolved, right? So we no longer demand items tsa bogologolo thata unless you're a collector. And then seasonality. Gona na ha o tla bo re o demand dinamune wa go di bona ko kae? Mango gone o nno ntse le o tsene yana, but gona na o ntse wa kusa ka bonya ka bona. That is affecting the demand for mango, the seasonality of it, because the is told in some mango months. And then advertisement, right? So is your advertising catchy? We don't brands like KFC, brands like chicken licking and what have you. I mostly chicken. Right now we have an uproar of a lot of celebrities using being contacted by Fanta. Fanta is using a lot of celebrities or associate celebrities in our country, right, to promote the brand. And what do you call it, man? Hungry Lion as well is using one of our comedians to promote the brand. So we demand it more because people who we interact with, we look at the profiles a lot. Bajadu is a thing. That affects our demand for it. And then price. This is one of the greatest factors. It's not the only factor, guys, but I will talk about a certain something that talks about how it affects this. So price here, guys, affects our demand in the most simplest manner. Price ile ko godimo thata, demand ya go Price ile ko tlase, demand ya oketsega. Simple as that. Right? So, now what the paper will always ask you is about the law of demand and the law of supply. So the law of demand, because we started talking about demand, says that at higher prices, buyers will demand less of an economic good. And the law of supply says that at higher prices, sellers will supply more of an economic good, which means that, okay, hari leang, ha price a selo e le ko godimo, or people are willing to buy it at a high price, then I will increase the supply because it means I can benefit a lot. The price is high, I'm getting a bigger profit margin, and everybody's happy. These two laws interact to determine the actual market prices and volume of goods that are traded on a market. So what we're saying basically is this, that, okay, so the balance between law of supply and demand will determine what the price of commodities. So the suppliers will say, okay, we are willing to offer the market or the demanding market hollow at this price. And then the demand will say, no, we're willing to buy it at this price. And the middle ground is where price is found. Right? Understood. Good. Now, several independent factors that affect the shape of market supply and demand influencing both the market prices and quantities that we observe in markets. There are several of them, guys, right, that affect the shape of market supply and demand. It's not just price and the ones that we talked about, right? So there's something that is called a demand curve that I want us to pay attention to, right? So we've talked about what demand is, how much of a product is required by customers. Now, demand curve is just a graphical representation. Yes, we're going to deal with graphs, but the graph is not so hard to explain, guys, right? So this is the graph, yeah, demand curve. I know it's not a curve, but yeah, nonetheless, this is the demand curve, right? So on the side is cost and on the bottom is quantity. So at a high cost, people will demand low. At a middle cost, people will demand middle, right? But at a low cost, the height of demand increases. You get it, guys? The quantity of things demanded at a low price is high. And then this is a sampled another demand curve. You see? So ha price ele 1 pula. Quantity ya demand ya ke 500. But ha price ele 5 pula. Quantity ya demand ya ke 100. You see the correlation there, guys? This is another demand curve. So in movement, they on young movement along the demand curve. On guys. Well, okay, when the price of the good changes, the quantity demand changes. I'll say it again. When the price changes, demand changes. That's how you observe the demand curve and the movement along it, right? Now, we're talking now about movement, right? But shift, guys, a shift in the demand or supply curve occurs when a goods quantity demanded or supplied changes, even though price remains the same. So shifty, guys. If you observe on the right, more demand. Again, how price ya ko tlase, demand ya change. But shifty, bona price ntse ya go godimo kana ya ko tlase. Mme go iragala me price high change. So if you can observe price and price a one here, but quantity demand you are king, quantity demanded still changes. You get it? This is because there are other factors that affect hormone besides price, that affect demand besides price, right? So now we will talk about supply curves. Supply curves, it's basically having to understand what supply is first and foremost. So supply means how much of a product or service is provided by organizations, by suppliers in basic terms, right? So just like demand curve, the supply curve is a basic representation, right? It's a typical illustration here that talks about, okay, the price will appear on the left and the quantity supplied will appear on the horizontal axis. This is a supply curve, guys, right? So with a supply curve, cost is that side, quantity is this side. So cost the highly godimo, quantity supplied is going to be kotas, right? And then quantity highlighted, the quantity supplied is also middle ground. And then just like that, when the cost is high, then the supply will be high because suppliers want to cover up the cost that they incurred, right? But equilibrium is this point. I don't want to talk so much about the worded part. I want us to look at the graphs and actually understand. So if you look at equilibrium, equilibrium is a middle ground where demand and supply meet. If the market is willing to supply as much as the demand is asking for, then we are at a state of equilibrium, right? Yeah. So changes in demand and supply. So the change in demand and supply is not only affected by price, right? Yeah. So demand and supply can change to affect price in unpredictable ways. So when demand changes or when supply changes, that affects the price, right? So demand is going to increase suddenly, creating what? A shortage in supply. Say for instance, supplier amagwinya, motho e leng gore go ka rekisa magwinya handle, o ntse a rekisa magwinya a itse no na ke supply batho ba le 50. All of a sudden go iragala demand ya increase out of nowhere. Bana ba sekolo ba simolola go oketsega o bana ba batho ba ba rekang from a company go irela batho ba le bantsi. So go iragalang demand price ya affectega. How? Or go affectega eng? Supply before price, because harder demand magonyali 60 or 70 motho supply magonyali 50, then it means that supply is shorting. Shortage means that products and services may be sold at a higher price. Why? To try and curb demand. How? Okay, one but for what like okay, it's a price for a demand because they can't handle the demand. Sometimes it's like that. You can't handle demand, so you increase your prices so that you sell to a select number of people, but you all still sell all of your products, right? And then excess supply occurs when a product has a higher price and customers are not willing to pay a higher price. So you come with a product, right? You buy it in bulk and then you come to sell to Botswana. Botswana don't buy, or you have excess supply. But how I demand on product that about 50, when it's like the product 100. What happens? Excess supply. But once you drop the prices, demand goes up. I hope you guys are getting the pattern of what I'm trying to talk about here, right? So excess demand, prices, we demand a lot. It's as simple as that, guys, right? I hope you guys are getting it, right? So eventually, if demand will ever exceed supply, the buyers may look for a cheaper alternative because suppliers will do what? Will increase their prices. And then Ronarira demand down because what? Next time, guys, we're going to talk about 2.3, right? So this is the discussion that I want you guys to deal with. Identifying the effects of the following: impact on the cigarette demand curve if more people choose e-cigarettes, vapors over cigarettes. I'm actually excited to hear for your inquiry on this one. I think for this one, we might have an actual virtual class more, should you guys allow it. Or you guys can just send me the voice notes, about it. Or yeah, it's like a little homework, if you will. Don't cry for it, guys. The students are. But guys, that was it for the lesson today. I never want to take hours and hours teaching. You can go through the video just relaxing, and taking it bit by bit. If you felt like, for instance, I didn't explain a lot of things because I felt like, they were basic arithmetics. So I want us to be able to finish and then get to a point where we start revising for the exam, guys. So we get our certificates. Next lesson, we're doing 2.3, and then we're done with chapter 2, and then we get on to chapter 3. Have a fantastic night, my fellow people.